For as long as language and stories have existed, the concept of good versus evil has rooted itself in our beliefs. And while most followers of these beliefs would say that there is a definitive, correct option for one to follow in life, the very existence of a good path to follow implies that there is a bad path as well. And perhaps there is no bad path as feared and dreaded as the infamous deal with the devil. And perhaps no deal with the devil has ever been as important to our understanding of cultures and history, or as interesting to those of us who love a good American horror story, as the famous tale of Robert Johnson. Hello everybody, today we are going to be talking about the legend of Robert Johnson and the deal with the devil that started rock and roll. Now, if a lot of you all are weird like me and enjoy creepy stories about American folklore, then the Robert Johnson story is probably nothing new. It's one of the most famous stories in all of not only American music, but in American culture. But one of the most fascinating aspects of Johnson's story, to me at least, is how it kind of serves as the final destination of a lot of these culminating ideas within the realm of the spiritual and supernatural. And how thousands of years of beliefs and practices came together to create this legend surrounding one man whose story is larger than life. And how that legend would go on to be the bedrock of a cultural movement that has changed the world forever. So in other words, we're going to talk about the legend of Robert Johnson and all the aspects of his story that are both true and mythical, but I also want to go back and talk about all of the cultural and religious beliefs for the past several thousand years that led up to a story like that of Johnson's to be possible. So if that sounds interesting to you, then stick around as we talk about the legend of Crossroad Deals with the Devil and the man and music who, for better or worse, will always be associated with that tale. Right after I'm done talking about whatever episode I'm having right now. But before we get into all of that, fellas, I have got something wild to tell you about today. And that is today's sponsor, AG1. Some of you will probably remember a couple months back when I did an ad for AG1. But at the time, I'll admit, I came to you all as a new convert to the Church of AG1. But now I stand before you as an evangelist. For those of you that don't know, AG1 is a full-body dietary supplement that helps with everything from your immune system to your digestion to your daily energy without being a ton of different multivitamins and pills you need to take every morning, and is instead just one drink. So instead of being an entire process to get your daily intake of nutrients, zinc, citrate, B12, biotin, and probiotics, you can do all of that in one easy step. And fellas, like I said, whenever I did that first ad, I'd only been drinking AG1 for like a week, but now after doing it for a couple of months, I am blown away. And full transparency, it is most likely that the results were as extreme as they were because I am a YouTuber who sits at a computer all day and mostly eats things like pizza and sandwiches. But I saw a dramatic change in my energy. And I'm not trying to feed you some fib and say that if you drink this once, you're going to be able to sprint a 5K. It's not like that. But after doing this consistently, after, getting the nutrients that I was supposed to be having every day, I had energy to start going to the gym more often. I had energy to power through a lot of videos and edits to get them up on time. I noticed a significant improvement in my daily routine. It's incredible what happens if you eat the things that your body is supposed to eat. Crazy, I know. And once again, it's your daily nutritional supplement wrapped up in one easy routine. Your AG1 will come in a bag like this, or you can do what I did and put it in this very aesthetic thermos to help with storage and refrigeration. So all that you have to do for AG1 is get 8 to 12 ounces of cold water, and from there just take a scoop of your AG1, dump it into the water, shake it up, and that's all it takes to start your day off right. And I know what a lot of you are probably thinking. You're looking at this and saying, okay, well, it's 9 health products rolled up into one. It's got to taste terrible, right? But with AG1, it tastes just fine. The primary ingredient in here is water, so it's mostly flavorless, but what flavor it does have is just kind of a natural sweetness. It's your daily routine made simple. And if you decide not to do it, and you're like me, then you're gonna miss it. So don't miss out now and get in on this fantastic offer. Because if you go to the link in the description and get in on AG1 now, then you will receive 2 free gifts. The first gift is 5 days worth of AG1 in a convenient travel pack that I would show now on camera if I hadn't already drank all of it. And the other is a year's supply of vitamin D3 and K2, which all you have to do for that is take the convenient dropper and take a drop of it every day. I even take it in my AG1. And I would also show that to you now if my dad hadn't stolen it from me, and I hope hasn't drinking the entire thing. So once again, get in on this fantastic lifestyle choice today, receive 2 free gifts, and starting your days the right way with AG1. Thank you all so much for watching the ad. Thank you so much to AG1 for sponsoring this video. It really does mean the most. Hope you all check them out. Link is in the description, and we are back to the video. We are going to go ahead and get into it, but as always, thank you for watching. Now, to really understand what makes the tale of Robert Johnson so important, we need to go back and figure out where these legends of crossroad deals with the devil came from in the first place. For one, the concept of a deal with the devil has existed for as long as the concept of the devil himself. One could argue that at the beginning of humanity, at least according to biblical beliefs, a deal was struck between Eve and the serpent. Eve wanted power and to be like God, and agreed to eat the fruit that the serpent offered. And then after that, these negotiations between humanity and the devil are carried out through our earliest stories. Anyone who practiced witchcraft or sorcery was believed to have made a deal with the devil in some regard. It was believed that by offering up their servitude, their soul, or the soul of another, they could take on these powers that the devil offered them. In a lot of these early stories from not only the Bible, but other Middle Eastern cultures, giving yourself away to dark spirits or promising your servitude to them was seen as the ultimate form of nihilistic living, or even like a commitment to damnation. Because again, most stories or beliefs in these cultures revolved around the idea of good versus evil. So while most of humanity was constantly battling evil in order to build up the good, fully encompassing yourself in the evil by giving even your soul to it was seen as an ultimate evil, one that could, in most cases, never be brought back from. In most legends, those who practiced dark magic were seen as completely removed from any mercy or forgiveness that may be allowed by others. It was as if they forfeited their humanity and became something demonic, something lesser than man. And while every story of making a deal with the devil isn't as extreme as giving over your soul, for example, one of the most famous proposed deals with the devil in all of the Bible is the story of Jesus whenever he was tempted in the wilderness, and the devil offered him several goods if Christ would bow down and serve him. But stories that involve forfeiting one's soul seem to at least be the most remembered. I mean, most, again, cultures and religions are in this constant war of endearing one's soul and fighting the good fight and what have you. So to give it away is something that is completely alien to most believers at the time, even to most believers today. It would also in a lot of cases be portrayed as a form of short-sightedness, where people give over the very part of themselves that makes them human to instead receive some kind of temporary gain. And this notion would continue to be prominent in a lot of the legends surrounding deals with the devil. One of the earliest post-biblical legends of a deal with the devil comes from the story of Saint Theophilus the Penitent. Again, the story of Theophilus is notable because it's one of the first legends regarding a voluntary contract or deal with the devil, but it's also pretty funny. So the story goes like this. Saint Theophilus was an archdeacon who was elected to be bishop, but he felt too humble to be elected bishop, so he turned down the position. Someone else gets the position of bishop and then removes Theophilus from his position as archdeacon. So, seeing no other alternative, Theophilus decides to make a deal with the devil to get the position of bishop back. The devil's deal being that he will give Theophilus the position if Theophilus renounces Jesus Christ and the Virgin Mary, to which Theophilus agrees. Shortly after this, Theophilus figures that was maybe a bad idea, so he begins to fast and pray for forgiveness for this. After a certain amount of time, Jesus agrees to forgive him, but the devil doesn't agree to these terms. So one night, Theophilus wakes up in bed and he has the contract that he signed in his own blood laid out across his chest. Theophilus takes that contract to another bishop, confesses all the sins that he has done, and the bishop throws the contract in the fire. I guess Theophilus could have done that the whole time. So the bishop throws the contract in the fire, and now I guess the devil abides by, paperwork. Because of that, Theophilus is freed, and on seeing that he is freed, he gets so happy that he dies. And that's it. That's the whole legend. This story came around the 6th century. It's certainly an interesting start to the narrative of Deals with the Devil. Similarly, the story of the Codex Gigas, one of the largest handwritten books in humanity's history, says that the entire book was written in a single night through a deal with the devil. According to legend, one day a monk who had broken the vows to the monastery he lived in was being threatened with punishment of being walled up in the walls of the monastery itself. In order to avoid this punishment, the monk said that he would write a book in one night that would glorify the monastery forever. When midnight came and the monk realized that he wasn't going to be able to complete the book in one night, he called on the devil to help him finish it. In exchange for the monk's servitude, the devil finished the entire book in one night. And quite eerily, despite the majority of the Codex Gigas containing the entirety of the Bible handwritten, as well as the early letters and records of the Catholic belief, near the end of the book there is a detailed depiction of the devil that was supposedly added as tribute to the book's true author. For this reason, the Codex Gigas is often referred to as the Devil's Bible. One of the more recent but equally famous legends comes from the Polish folktale of Pan Twardowski. Twardowski was a sort of nobleman who lived in the 16th century and made a deal with the devil, according to legend, in order to receive magical powers. This lines up a lot more with the older stories of witchcraft that we talked about earlier. Twardowski promised his soul to the devil, but said in the contract, thinking that he could outwit the devil, that the devil could only come to kill him if Twardowski was ever in Rome. Twardowski, who never planned to visit Rome, felt that he had tricked the devil into both immortality and magical powers. That is until, according to legend, Twardowski found himself staying at an inn in the countryside. Whenever he asked the name of this inn, the innkeeper told him that it was named Rome. So, loophole in the contract, the devil comes to collect his soul, and as the devil's carrying him away, Twardowski prays to God for forgiveness. So God comes and makes the devil let him go, but the devil was halfway to hell, and somehow Twardowski got dropped on the moon. And another factor in the legend is that he made his friend into a spider at one point earlier in the story. So whenever he gets to the moon, Twardowski's got his little spider friend. So as the legend has it, he's still on the moon to this day, and every now and then will reel his friend, the spider, down to earth on a web, and the spider will tell him what's going on, and then climb back up the web and report back to him because he's just stuck on the moon up there. Now, despite some of the hilarious aspects of these stories, we can see the pieces that would lead to the modern cultural idea of a deal with the devil. Someone, either out of desperation or feeling that they have been wronged in life, seeks out a supernatural power that's greater than themselves. They promise something that is far beyond the worth of whatever they receive in exchange, and eventually come to realize that. And in most of these stories, it ends with the person recognizing the wrong they've done and calling out to God, and God saving them in one aspect or the other, even if there is a sort of comeuppance at the end of it, like Theophilus still dying out of joy or Twardowski being stuck on the moon. Still better than, hellfire. But that last bit of redemption isn't universal in these stories, but we'll get to that in a minute. Now, the other aspect of these crossroad deals with the devil, other than, the deal with the devil part, is the crossroad part. And the supernatural significance of crossroads has been an important part in spiritual history for thousands of years. See, crossroads have held a spiritual significance for some time because of their liminal nature. It is the complete state of being in between. In other words, if you're standing at a crossroads, you're not only neither here nor there, but you're not even on a direct path from one location to another. You are at the very intersection of intersection. So because crossroads were seen as a point of limbo in the physical realm, it was assumed to be part of a point of limbo in the supernatural realm. See, a lot of early belief systems, especially regarding the afterlife, say that the realm of the spiritual exists in the same space as the physical, just on a different plane. In other words, gods, spirits, and devils that exist next to us and around us, we just can't always contact or see them. So crossroads were seen as a sort of gateway or access point between the realm of the spiritual and the physical. The ancient Greeks would often leave offerings at crossroads because it was seen that the gods could more easily access them at these points. In several pagan traditions, it was seen as a sign of disrespect to be buried at a crossroad, because it was believed if you entered the spiritual realm at this point of limbo, then it was possible that your soul would be always stuck in this state of in-between, and you would be left to wearily roam the roads forever, never being here nor there. For this reason, several criminals were executed and buried at crossroads. That, and it's also a pretty good deterrent for criminals coming into town if there's a bunch of people hanging and buried on the side of the road whenever they get there. So you have these two different legends that are building themselves up throughout history. You have the concept of the deal with the devil and how man can call out to the devil, and even works like the Lesser Key of Solomon give specific instructions on which devil to or demon to invoke for whatever you need and how to do it. And also all these stories of both men of religion and witches and what have you throughout history using the devil to achieve power. And then on another side in history, you have the stories of the crossroads being this intersection between the spiritual and the physical, and that growing in predominance and being put into practice, even if in small ways, through things like executions, like I mentioned. And then, at the meeting point between these two ideas, we have what is perhaps the most famous story of a deal with the devil ever, again, maybe besides Robert Johnson, but we'll get to that, and that is the tale of Faust. The original legends of Faust originate around 1587, but the most famous version of the story was eventually made by Goethe in the 1800s. Now, I'm not going to harp on Faust here because I am definitely going to make a whole video on it eventually, but the short version is that Faust was a man of religion who wanted to use the devil's power, depending on which version of the legend you go with, to either receive wealth or the love of a woman. Faust does this by going to the crossroads at night and calling on the devil to grant him his wish. The devil sends his representative, Mephistopheles, to grant Faust's wish and sign the contract. Now, in the original versions of the story, you remember how I mentioned most of the old legends of deals with the devil have like a happy ending where the person, sees what they've done wrong and they pray to God and God saves them? That's not how the original stories of Faust went. The original stories were he was in turmoil because he realized he was going to hell, and then he goes to hell, and that's it. That's the story. But in Goethe's version and renditions thereafter, he prays for forgiveness and is saved of his contract. The overarching theme being that in spite of our insolence and mistakes, God can forgive all and has power over the devil. Faust is not only one of the most famous stories of a deal with the devil, but it is also the first, at least explicitly published, to feature a deal with the devil taking place at a crossroad. And it seems that over hundreds and thousands of years of beliefs and practices, we finally have this idea of a physical point being the bridge between the physical and the spiritual, and someone misusing that bridge in order to receive worldly pleasures. And it also lays the groundwork for the foundation of American music, a man by the name of Robert Johnson. So in order to understand where the legend of Robert Johnson came from and how it ties into the stories of Faust and deals with the devil that I've talked about up until this point, we need to talk a bit about Robert Johnson's life. Robert Leroy Johnson's life was one of mystery, at least to us in the modern age looking back. He was born on May 8th of 1911, or at least we think that's when he's born because there's no sure record of his birth. That date of May 8th comes from Robert's sister, who said that their mother told her at one point that that was the date Robert was born. However, that doesn't line up with the 1920 census or Johnson's enrollment records. However, it is likely that the reports in those records were a lie in order to receive better enrollment and education at a young age. From what we do know about Robert's life, from a young age, it was one born out of tragedy. While Robert was born in Mississippi, he didn't stay there long. That's because his father, Charles Dodds, was a black landowner, which in 1911 was not popular with the locals. On threat of lynching and destruction to his property, Robert and his father eventually moved to Memphis. It's believed by many that while in Memphis, Robert began to fall in love with music. Around the age of 11, Robert moved back to Mississippi to be with his mother, who was now married to a Mississippi sharecropper. While there, Robert's mother told him that Charles Dodds was not his biological father, and that instead, his biological father was a man named Noah Johnson. So, Robert changed his name to Robert Johnson. Life in Mississippi was very hard for Robert. His stepfather again was a sharecropper, and Robert didn't want to work on his stepfather's plantation. And for it, Robert's stepfather frequently beat him. Those who knew Robert says that he maintained a friendly disposition through all of this, as well as a unique skill and love for the harmonica. However, Robert had dreams of becoming a guitarist and settling himself into the new and controversial genre of music, the blues. Now, by the time Robert was 18 years old, around 1928-1929, the blues were despised by evangelical and religious groups in the southern United States. It was universally seen as the devil's music, and anyone who played it was seen to be at risk of their very soul. And while a lot of historical accounts kind of skew the records and say that it was just white Baptists who despised black artists who were creating the blues music, it was also black churches and black religious groups who hated the blues music as well. So those early artists that practiced the music were fighting an uphill battle from everyone. They were ostracized from every community, and several of them didn't have a place to call home because of it. But to men like Robert Johnson, who had grown up and known nothing in their lives besides turmoil, that seemed to be just fine. In 1929, Robert married a 16-year-old girl named Virginia. Now, Virginia's family, at least according to those who knew Robert in life, hated Robert. The reason for this being, again, he played what was seen as the devil's music, and it was seen as unacceptable to most people of the time. Robert promised that he would hang up his guitar and live a life as an honest man and an honest father. So then, when shortly after their marriage, Virginia became pregnant and a couple weeks before she was due to give birth, traveled home to be with her mother, Robert said that he would come and meet her and their new child shortly afterwards. However, it was during these 2 weeks that Robert went on a final tour and went to local joints playing the guitar and listening to blues music. Whenever he did eventually return to Virginia's mother's home, he found that both Virginia and their child had died in childbirth. And Virginia's family ruthlessly blamed Robert, saying that this was punishment from God for him playing the devil's music. In light of a tragedy that hopefully none of us will ever have to experience, Robert went back to the only thing he knew, which was music. And at the age of 19, he began to hang around and listen to local musicians in Mississippi like Son House. However, the important thing to note about Robert during this time in his life is that he was not good at the guitar. In fact, he was apparently so bad, according to people like Son House, that they would refer to what he did as noising, and said that he was going to run all the patrons off whenever he played, and they would constantly, make fun of him and berate him for it. So Robert, who found comfort in music and a life that perhaps he couldn't find comfort anywhere else, was now being told that he was so bad that he should just put the guitar down. Musicians even remarking and saying that they don't want him to touch their stuff because they're afraid he'll break the strings. So Robert, deciding he wasn't going to let this part of his life pass him by, decided to do something about it. Robert disappeared for a few years, and whenever he came back, Son House, the same man who had berated him before and told him that he had just been noising, saw Robert walk into a joint that Son was already playing at, and Robert walked up to him and asked if he could play. Seeing that it had been some time, Son House decided to let Robert take the stage. One of the first things that Son and other band members noticed is that Robert's guitar had a 7th string added to it for some reason. Thinking this peculiar and wanting to see what the kid was able to do, they all stood back and waited for him to make more noise. However, when Robert Johnson started to play the guitar, something magical happened. Robert was not just good at the guitar in this amount of time, but he was great at it. Those who witnessed said that it was as if 3 people were playing the guitar at once, with him doing the bass, the main score, and a rhythm all at the same time, using his hands and thumb to curl around the top board, and doing the work of an entire band by himself. He began to make noises on that 7-string guitar that people at the time didn't think was even possible. And from there, the noisy kid from Delta, Mississippi would go on to change music forever. Now, while all who heard Robert were impressed by him, tragically, he didn't receive a lot of notoriety while he was alive. He would travel from town to town with fake names, and he would play at a bar for a few weeks before packing up and leaving for the next town. People who saw him perform said that he would just box up his guitar mid-set, walk out, and would be gone for a year or more at a time. And during this time, tragedy didn't seem to leave him alone either, as in 1933, only a few years after the death of his first wife, his second wife died as well. As I said before, there are not many surefire dates in Robert's life. Again, most of his life wasn't documented, at least not at any official capacity. However, some of the only dates we know about are the dates of November the 23rd to the 25th of 1936. During this time, Robert met with a local radio jockey who recorded 16 of his songs in a nearby hotel room. Less than a year later, on June the 19th and 20th of 1937, Robert would record 13 more. These 29 songs are the totality of Robert Johnson's recorded music. Now, he did several variations and different recordings of each of these songs, but again, 29 songs are all we have of Robert Johnson's career. And I can't play it here because YouTube will execute me over copyrighted music, but if you go and listen to Robert Johnson's music, it is uncanny. Again, this was recorded in the 1930s, before concepts of rock and roll or of what the guitar can do were really known to the public at the time. And then when you listen to Robert's stuff, it's like you can hear the bones of what would one day become modern music, or at least rock and roll. The way he is pushing that acoustic guitar as fast and in as many different places as it can go, it gives the notion of something trying to break out. It is reminiscent of rock and roll the way that your grandfather is reminiscent of yourself. You can look at him and you can see the structures in his cheekbones or the way he holds his eyes, and you can see how that one day led to what you are. And listening to Robert Johnson's music, it's like it's written with the calligraphy or with the harbinger of what's to come. And it's for this reason that Robert Johnson is hailed as the master of the blues, not only because of the music that he forefronted, but because of what he said and did with the music at his time. And you can feel a lot of the misery this guy had in life come through in his lyrics and the way he sings them. I love my baby don't love me, but I really love that woman, can't stand to leave her be. Ain't but the one thing makes Mr. Johnson drink. I was worried about how you treat me, baby, I began to think. Oh, babe, my life don't feel the same. You breaks my heart when you call Mr. So-and-so's name. Baby, I don't care where you bury my body when I'm dead and gone. You may bury my body down by the highway side, so my old evil spirit can get a Greyhound bus and ride. See, Robert was good. In fact, he might have been too good. So good, in fact, that it began a story that would solidify Robert and American music history forever. See, around this time, a story began to crop up that in those 3 missing years, Robert Johnson took himself to a crossroad and sold his soul to the devil. And that by giving his soul over to the devil, he was able to receive a skill at this instrument that ushered in an entirely new age of music. See, Robert wasn't the first story of a musician selling his soul to the devil in order to get skills at an instrument. Figures like Niccolo Paganini and Giuseppe Tartini are famous for being violinists who were supposedly so good that they surely must have sold their soul to the devil in order to obtain their skills. But Robert was the first, or at least the most notable in American history, to supposedly sign this contract. While there's variations to the story depending on who you ask, the majority of them go something like this. One night, after being laughed off stage for his lack of skill at the guitar, Robert walked to the intersection of Highway 49 and 61 in Clarksdale, Mississippi, and decided to give everything he had in order to get something that he saw as worth. So he sits there at the crossroad, he sees the stars in the night sky, and he waits for midnight to roll around. Whenever the clock strikes 12, Robert gets out his guitar and just starts to play a song. Till suddenly, out of the tall grass comes walking a tall black man. Someone who seems otherworldly, completely transfigured from this world. Something that doesn't exist in the reeds of the Mississippi wilderness, and something that shouldn't exist on this crossroad before Robert. The man walks up to Robert, and Johnson knows the score. He knows what this man is, and he knows what he's there to do. The man simply asks if he can tune Robert's guitar. So Robert holds it out. This man takes it, begins to tune it, and he plays a few songs, playing the different strings, perhaps even adding the seventh one, and just strumming it, showing Robert how it's done. Before, after a while, he passes the guitar back and then fades back into the wilderness. And many believe that on that night, Robert Johnson sold his soul knowing the score of what he was asking for to let the devil tune his guitar, and therefore to let Robert take the skills off of it. See, there's several aspects of Robert's life that lend well into this tale. For one, the fact, as I mentioned earlier, that a lot of his life, even his birth, is mostly unaccounted for, especially that mysterious 3-year period of time where he went from being awful at guitar to one of music's greatest legends. And what you also have to realize is that Robert had spent his entire upbringing being told that he is of the devil, that he is sinful for even wanting to play or listen to this music in the first place. So in a lot of Robert's songs, he capitalized on that, or at the very least embraced it. So naturally, a lot of his lyrics harken back to these ideas. In a song called Me and the Devil Blues, he says, "Early this morning when you knocked upon my door and I said, 'Hello, Satan, I believe it's time to go,' me and the devil was walking side by side." In a song called Hellhound on My Trail, he says, "And the days keeps on worrying me. There's a hellhound on my trail, hellhound on my trail, hellhound on my trail." And with song titles like Up Jump the Devil and The Crossroad Blues, in the latter of which he says, "Down to the crossroads, fell down on my knees, asked the Lord above for mercy, take me if you please." You can see how a lot of what was definitely true about him leaned into the myth, even if accidentally. And perhaps what cemented this pact with the devil more than anything else was his untimely death. According to his death certificate, he died on August the 16th of 1938. His death certificate lists the date, the location of Greenwood, Mississippi, and nothing else. So again, in confirmed record, there is no cause of death or possible reason given to the death of Robert Johnson, which, as you could imagine, stoked the fires of the legend surrounding him. Many believe that this untimely death was perhaps the devil coming to collect his due, and that Robert, who spent a lot of his life talking about hellhounds on his trail and praying for God at the crossroads, knew that his time was going to be short-lived. To add to the mystery, no one's even sure where Robert Johnson is buried. There are a total of 3 possible graves that all have markers attached to them, but again, Robert Johnson didn't see a ton of success while he was alive, so no one knows where his body went. All serving to mystify the man who would go on to lay the foundation of music as we know it today. Now, everything that I've said so far has been from the legends and the few things we know for sure about Johnson's life. And while I could leave it there to just, talk about the deal with the devil stuff that I've mentioned up until this point, I think the aspects of Johnson's life that are pretty well confirmed by those who knew him are just as, if not more, interesting. See, according to those who knew Johnson in life, during those 3 years that he disappeared and supposedly made a deal with the devil, he actually went to a famous blues musician by the name of Ike Zimmerman. Zimmerman took Robert under his wing and began to teach him everything he knew about the guitar. At night, Robert and Ike would slip away to the cemeteries near Hazelhurst, Mississippi, and practice the guitar. Ike would say that out here, while he's performing in front of an audience, no one's going to complain. So the two of them would set up until the early hours of the morning, night after night, playing the guitar. And it was over these 3 years of work and dedication that Robert Johnson became the musician we know him as today. The details of his death, while again unconfirmed, but told by those who knew him, is as equally interesting. See, those who knew Robert said that he had an affinity for whiskey and women. In several of these towns that he would stay at for some time, he would flirt with the girls nearby and then stay in their houses, and then whenever he passed back through town, he'd just go to the same ladies' houses again. Well, according to Sonny Boy Williamson, who knew Robert, one night they were at a bar near Greenwood, Mississippi. While at this bar, one of the women that Robert had either slept with or was flirting with was the wife of the bartender. The bartender poisoned a bottle and offered it to Robert. According to Sonny, he told Robert not to drink the bottle and to never drink a bottle someone else had opened, but Robert shooed him off and decided to drink it anyway. Now, what this poison could have been is speculated as anything from mothballs to strychnine, but whatever it was, It left Robert in agony for days on end, bleeding out of his mouth. Until, after a few nights of anguish, one night Robert decided to crawl out into the streets and take one final gaze at the Mississippi stars, the same stars that the legend of him selling his soul to the devil were told under, and he died in the streets on August the 16th of 1938. If his date of birth of 1911 is to be believed by his family, then Robert was the founding member of the 27 Club. The 27 Club, for those that don't know, is part of an urban legend that artists who have an exceptional talent or make a significant impact in their lives are destined for an early death at the age of 27. Several famous members are a part of this club, with people such as Amy Winehouse and Kurt Cobain. Again, just another footnote to the legacy this guy left on music. Robert McCormick spent a large part of his life in research to the